Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Every Now and Then. This is a podcast I do for the Smith family where we discuss historic events. And today's topic is definitely a historic event, a family event. Our brother Kyle has published his first book, and I say first book because I believe he's got more coming. And we want to celebrate that. It's a family celebration as well. And this is a podcast that I did for my nursing students at Ohio State. And I want to play it in its entirety for you now as Kyle and I discuss the book and some of the background to it. So enjoy. Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Smart Lawyers Love Dumb Nurses. I am your host, Dr. Brian Smith. I want to welcome you to the program. And today I have a special guest, Kyle, with me today. Kyle has written a new book that I want him to talk about. And we want the words of our podcast today to be inspiring for you, to motivate you, and also to give you a positive outlook and also to give you some life lessons that we've learned over the years in our experience. So, Kyle, I want to welcome you to our podcast today.
Brian, thank you for having me.
And I think one question I want to start with is why you wrote the book. What was your reasoning behind it? And give me some background on it and what the book is about, really.
Yep. So the title of the book is Recruiting is Easy. But even if you're a person that's not a recruiter, meaning someone that works for a company and finds talent and goes through the hiring process, but it's not just intended for that person. And I'll explain why. The reason behind the book is that in this world, I'm seeing more and more reliance on technology, to the point of where I'm seeing technology being put in a position ahead of what I believe is the most important thing, and that is people. So we're using technology to replace people. And if you stop to think about it, where are you not seeing that? We're seeing that in industry. We're seeing that in retail. We're seeing that in our everyday lives, to where the people component is being replaced with a technology or a machine. And I think that's to our detriment. And I've especially seen that in some of my worlds in human resources, and I'll have other books where I will speak on this theme, but this one focuses on the recruiting element and talent attraction. And I'm seeing so much a reliance on applicant tracking systems and other technologies such as artificial intelligence, where at the end of the day, in human resources and especially recruiting, it's all about the people. It's about finding that person that's the best fit for the role that you have open. So I thought it was important that I write this book to talk about that, because I don't want us to, as a profession, as a country, as a people, to lose sight of the fact that ultimately our success is about how we relate to each other, how we work together. And I fall back on a quote that I can't take credit for, but I certainly use a lot, and that is, life is a team game. And I think we're losing sight of that a little bit, and we're suffering as a result, because I see so many companies talk about how difficult it is to find good people and how much trouble they're having attracting people to their roles. And I got to be honest with you, and I'm not bragging here, I don't have that difficulty, because I focus on the people component. I look to make relationships with potential candidates. And I say potential because they may never be someone I'll hire. I may not have an opening for them. But I try to connect with people and the events and different activities that I'm involved in. Career fairs, job fairs, visiting colleges, universities, other organizations, talking at associations, making contacts throughout my community, working with different agencies throughout the community, throughout the state, and throughout the country to make connections with people. because I think that's what's most important. So building those relationships. And what I've found is, Brian, that as a result of that, it has made my life much easier as a recruiter. In other words, it's made recruiting easy, which is the title of the book, and that's the motivation behind it.
That is really great to hear. I remember a quote by Stephen Jobs. He once said that management is about persuading people to do things they really don't want to do. Leadership is about inspiring people to do things they didn't think they could do. So we don't need a title to be a leader. People would rather follow a leader with a heart than a leader with a title, I believe. And I was wondering, what type of leadership qualities do you expound on in your book that you'd like to share with our audience today?
Absolutely, Brian. Thanks for asking that. And this will come out in this book. But again, as I mentioned, I have books in the future planned that will talk about this theme as well, because it really relates to so many things about success, whether it's working your team to success, and I use team very loosely. Could be a sports team, could be your household, could be your team at work that you're leading or that you're a part of. But I expound on a few things in this book that carry over, and a big one is making the personal connection. Again, spoken to that a little bit, but where I'm going with that is understanding the people that you lead. Understanding from the standpoint of what do they need. And I don't want to use the term servant leadership. I hear that used a lot, and it's gotten to the point now where people seem to like to use it. I don't think they know exactly what it means. So I'm not coming from that perspective. But it's understanding your team to know what they need. I'm going to give a quick example in my role that I fulfill in my organization. So I'm head of human resources for a company in the Midwest, Consumer Products, and I joined that company a couple of years ago. And a member of my team had been with the organization coming up on 25 years at that point. And she'd been in HR for a number of years. She was very experienced and very sound HR practices. Okay. To put it in more simpler terms, she knew what she was doing. She did not need me to come in as her leader and redirect her efforts, come up with all these new fancy ideas and systems and programs. She didn't need that. She knew what she needed to do. What she needed from me is someone that could support her efforts. If there were stumbling blocks in her way, if there were challenges that she was facing, if she was working on something and she needed a listening ear, if she came to me and she asked for advice, and notice I say ask for advice, that I would give it. And also that she had someone there that was looking out for her and, again, to put it in simpler terms, had her back. And I knew that going in. That's what she needed from me as a leader, those components. So that's where I focused my attention. And this isn't a pat on the back. If she were here, I know what she would say, because we talk about it often, because I check in with her to make sure that I'm providing her what she needs. And the resounding answer is yes. She has the support that she needs, and I've seen her thrive over the last couple of years. And again, may sound like I'm patting myself on the back. I apologize. It's part of the lesson that I'm trying to convey here now. But it's been a resounding success for her. I've seen her thrive. And as a leader, that's what you're looking for. And I tell supervisors that I advise and counsel all the time, your success is directly related to the success of your team. The flip side of that is, if your team or a team member is failing, that is a direct reflection onto your efforts. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. I don't care how well individually you think you're doing. If your team is not doing well, you are unsuccessful. And as a leader, no matter what your function is, what you're doing, recruiting, and I'll tie that in a moment. If your team is not successful, you're unsuccessful. That's the bottom line. So if there's something that team member is not doing well in, or they need help with, or they need some development in, that's on you. That's on you. It's a group effort to make it come to fruition, but you've got to be the one in the leadership position to set those wheels in motion. So how does that tie back to recruiting? In the same way, you approach recruiting with the success of the candidate in mind, not the success of the candidate going through your process and getting hired. Certainly that's a piece of it. But I ultimately want to see the people that I interact with succeed no matter where they end up. Okay, because I have their interest at heart at first. So what does that mean in practicality? Well, it means I'm keeping in contact with those candidates. Certainly through the hiring process I am. They always know where they stand. And the other thing that I tell them is, if it feels like a long time since we've talked, send me an email and I will respond. Even if my response is, I don't have an update, I'll give them a response. And candidates appreciate that. They also appreciate the fact that I keep in contact even beyond the process. I've made the joke, but it's true. I have one connection that I made, and it was 7 years later that I hired her. I was at a different company at that point, and I hired her into a role. She since has moved on. We're about 11, 12 years into this, and her and I still keep in contact to this day. She lives down in Texas with her family. She's got a couple kids at this point, so I've known her before she even had kids. And I knew her right after she got married. They're celebrating their 10th anniversary not long ago. So that's what that means. It's rooting for people's success in what they do. The same holds true with your relationships, with your organizations, whether it's higher education, whether it's other companies, whether it's other organizations or associations. I want them to be successful, because if they're successful, guess what happens? So am I. This is all a community. Quick example on that. So a little over a year ago now, one of an organization in the community where I work, a smaller company, I had met the gentleman at a job event, and he said, gosh, I'm fascinated with what you guys do and so on. I said, hey, come out and see us sometime. I love to host people at the company that I work for. I've got a presentation I go through. It's about a 20-minute presentation. I'll talk about our company and who we are, what we're about, what we stand for, and so on, give them the history of the company. And then we walk around the building for about 15 minutes or so, just on a building tour. I introduce them to people as they come along that work in our company and show them the different functions, take a little peek on the manufacturing side so they can see the nuts and bolts of how the product is made a little bit. We have a room in our building to where we've got some of our history, so some of the earlier products in its iteration before it was refined to what it is now. And then we regroup in the conference room or wherever it is we've met, and I always have a parting gift. I make the joke that you can't come visit us unless you leave with one of our products, so I always have a product that I can give to them that they can leave with, and they appreciate that. But I try to make an experience for them because I want to have that connection. And what typically happens, and again, not bragging, this is the reality. They'll always say, oh my gosh, I love what you guys do here. I love what you stand for, what you're about. I know this person, that person. Do you mind if I send them to, they might be looking for a job, or they are looking for a job? And the answer is always the same. Yes, please do. I said, I may not have something open for them, but a couple of promises I'm going to make. One, I'm going to talk to them. Two, I'm going to connect with them on LinkedIn. And three, I'm going to keep them in mind for opportunities, not only here, but someplace else that I work. So this particular example, this gentleman has someone in mind that he knows is going to be graduating in May. They're looking for a job and so on. And I said, I would love to talk to him. So I talked to the young lady. We connect on LinkedIn. I don't have anything open for her. And that's in April. She graduates in May. We stay in contact. That's the other thing. We're on LinkedIn. We stay in contact and so on through that mechanism. Well, October rolls around. We have an employee leave in a critical role to our business. Guess who's the first person I think of when that position comes open? The young lady that I met back in April. Within 8 days, she had interviewed, we extended an offer, and she accepted, and we set a start date for her. That's how these things work. There was no guarantee when I talked with her in April that I'd ever have anything open. But we made the connection. We got the hard parts out of the way. I got to know her, got to know who she was, because that's the beauty of that too. You get to know the person, what they're really about over that period of time before you hire them. And that led to an extremely quick hire in what in our business was an extremely critical role that we couldn't just have open. So what we were able to do is she spent a week sitting with the person that was leaving the company. Because remember, I said, we got her in a week. The person had turned in their 2-week notice. So we brought her in that Monday. So Monday through Friday, she was able to sit side by side with the person who was leaving, and it gave us a jump start so that we had no break in time for a business critical role. And I could give you other examples of that as well. But that's the value of building those relationships with organizations, with companies, and so on. And that's a lot of what I talk about in the book. And Brian, to your point when we kicked this segment off, these are lessons that apply to any aspect of life. Yes, does it apply to talent acquisition and how I utilize it? Of course. But think about in other parts of your life to where it would be great and helpful and beneficial to have connections with people that maybe have expertise that you don't know, or they know people who know people that can put you in connection with on issues or topics or something that you're dealing with. Think about the benefits of that. And that's why I come back to my quote, and that's where I'll end this piece of the discussion, saying life is a team game. But Brian, that's probably a much longer answer than maybe you were looking for, but I really wanted to get into the nuts and the bolts of the book and why the message that I'm trying to get across is so important.
Absolutely, and I think our listeners need to hear that. And what I'm really hearing from what you're saying is successful people need to build each other up. They motivate, inspire, they push each other. But, unsuccessful people hate, blame, complain. And there's an old saying that weak minds discuss people, average minds discuss events, strong minds discuss ideas. And I think what you're really talking about in the book, and what I think our listeners might be surprised when they buy the book, is you're talking more than just about going through a hiring process. What you're really talking about, if you read the book, is about people empowering themselves, being strong-minded. So I'd like to conclude our podcast today with just talking a little bit about what else is in your book about more than just getting a job and keeping the job, but working on the mental aspect of your game, really becoming what I call unbreakable inside your mind and your heart, and doing the work on yourself and for your career that no one can break you, and getting a stronger mentality. So I think we'll conclude with just your final thoughts on some of the unwritten aspects about the job situation and how you can improve your life to make yourself more attractive for the job market by making your inner self as beautiful as the outside.
Well, Brian, the first thing I would say is, again, this message is universal, and this will serve you well if you're interviewing, and I'll tie it in. Focus less on yourself and focus more on others. Okay, that's the general answer, and that's the general focus of the book. If you, as you said, if you read between the lines, that's the message. But here's where that comes out. If you're interviewing for a job that you really want, here's what I can tell you, and I'm going to be blunt about this, but I don't mean it to sound quite as blunt as it is. If you're interviewing for a job, that interviewer cares less about you and more about what you can do for that company and do for them. So that is how you have to approach that interview. I don't care about your experience and so on, and what you've done and where you've gone. What I care about is how you can apply that experience, that knowledge, those skills and ability to the problem that I have, the situation that I'm dealing with, what I'm looking for that has created the reason for that position to be open, whether it's a newly created position or someone has left that role. There's some level of a problem that exists there, and that's why I have called you in to meet with me, to meet with us, and talk about it. Because I'm hoping you're the person that walks through the door and says, oh, that's your problem? Well, here's my thoughts on that based upon what I've done before. Because the other thing we know is the best predictor of future performance is past performance in the same or similar situation. So by approaching that interview asking yourself, what can I do for them? What do I bring for them? You're solving my problem. So by being focused on the other person, you're making yourself valuable, and you're demonstrating that value. That's the other thing. And I talk to candidates about this all the time. I don't want to see on your resume organizational skills, leadership skills. Everybody says that. That's worn out. You convey in that resume how you're organized, where you've been a leader, those things. That's what I'm looking for, because that's the proof. I always give this simple example, and I talk to candidates all the time, especially students, about this. I ask this question. I say, who gave the better answer? And the question is, I ask the candidate, and this is an example. It's a simple example, mind you. Do you know Excel? Candidate 1 says, yes, I sure do. Candidate 2 says, I do, Mr. Smith. And in fact, I use Excel in my everyday work. In my classes, I keep a list of all the assignments that I have that are due by class. I have the due date, when they're due. I've got the notes, some important notes that I need to know about the project. And then at the end, I always keep a column too that indicates my grade. And I use that to keep track of my homework and the assignments that I have to get done and so on, so I can stay on track. And then I ask the student, okay, of those two responses, which one answered my question best? Which one proved that they knew Excel? And obviously it's a rhetorical question at that point, because it's number 2. So that's how you want to approach your interviews, any discussion that you're having with someone. And again, think about this. This applies to sales too. Let's say you're in a sales role. What are you trying to do by having an audience with me? You're trying to solve a problem that I either have or didn't know I had. It's the same approach. What can you do for that other person? And what I also find, and there's certainly plenty of literature on this, and it goes far beyond the religious bent, regardless of where you stand on religion, but certainly it's built into religion. The happiest people are those that see what they can do for others. Because at the end of the day, that's what life's all about. To Brian's earlier point, it's about making the difference in the world and the impact you have on others. There's a famous quote that I point to all the time. People may not remember your name, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. And if you're approaching life and your relationships, asking yourself, how can I help that other person? What can I do to positively influence them? You're going to make an impact well beyond your time knowing that person. But Brian, if you read between the lines of my book, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Approaching your professional relationships from that standpoint of how can I help the other person?
That is great advice, Kyle, and I think that's a good place to end our podcast today. I want to thank Kyle for again joining me, author Kyle now of HR Kyle, and hopefully more to come. Remember, everyone, life does not get better by chance. It gets better by change. And great things never come from staying in your comfort zone. I'm sure Kyle had to leave his comfort zone, take some risks to write his book, and it will come to fruition, we know. And in conclusion, I want to say that if you're searching for that one person who will change your life forever, look in the mirror. It's you, and you can do it. I want to thank my guest again, author Kyle Smith, HR Kyle. I want to thank you for listening. Stay focused, stay grounded, and stay tuned. That was the podcast for my series, Smart Lawyers Love Dumb Nurses, with Kyle and I discussing a historic moment, his first book. And I also want to thank all of you, all family members and friends, for listening in. So every now and then, we go back in time to review, remember, recall a moment in time in our family. So I will see you again down the road. Thank you for listening.